Hi, my name is Hans Schultz. I'm with Bike Friday, one of the co-founders here. Congratulations on purchasing your new tandem from Bike Friday. You'll be receiving your bike in a few days, and this gives you a chance to become familiar with the packaging and assembly of your bicycle. When your bike arrives, it'll come in a suitcase that looks like this, probably a different color, but who knows, it might be yellow. And inside, you're going to find your brand new tandem. Determine which is the front and which is the back. I prefer to assemble the rear part of the bike first. The rear part of the bike will be the one with both the wheels in it. In this case, you see one is packed with a trailer. If you don't have a trailer, it's a real simple thing to just eliminate those pieces. The bike's going to assemble the same way with or without the trailer. First thing to do is, of course, is remove the parts from the suitcase and determine whether you actually received everything that you intended to get. If you're missing something, please give us a call right away. Our toll-free number is 800-777-0258. So I'm going to pull all the pieces out. One of the first things I'm going to look for is the tool bag. And inside the tool bag, you're going to find a pair of gloves, a camming tool, the quick release for the front of your bike if it needed to be removed in the case of yours. And that's an important thing to note, is that each one of the bikes, since we do so many customized items, each bike is going to have subtle differences. And this is a good time to look at your bike and make notes as you take it out of the suitcase. Depending on the type of bars you get, the type of shifters that you get, even the size of the tires, there's going to be subtle differences in the way the bike is packed. So if you notice pieces of packaging material that you don't see in the video, it probably has something to do with the person packing your bike noticing that there needs to be a little change here and there. Make a note of it now so that when it comes time to repack the bike, you'll know about those pieces and there won't be a mystery. So I'm going to take these tools out. I have a special little pack. It comes with a multi-tool with lots of Allen wrenches. It has a headset wrench and pedal wrench. I'm going to put those in my little bag here. It has a 4mm Bondhouse driver, which has a little ball end on it. Very good for removing bottle cages and that sort of thing. Of course, the quick release. Set that aside. The camming tool was actually used for disassembly of the bike, and you'll see that later. And of course the gloves. If you desire to keep your hands very clean, those are very useful. We'll continue to pull the pieces out. Front wheel, trailer parts, there's a rear rack. You may or may not have a rear rack or a trailer. The rear wheel and the rear end of the bike. I'm going to go ahead and put this quick release in right away, the front wheel. Notice that the spring that comes with the quick release has a small end and a big end. The small end goes on first, up against the axle. The big end sticks out. Put that on there just so I don't have to look for it later, particularly if you're someplace like the grass or working over a sewer grate, someplace where you could actually lose those pieces. It's a good idea to take care of them right away. Next, I'm going to pull the rear end out, and notice there's a number of cables and that sort of thing that are hanging off. Let's try to arrange those things so they're not going to interfere with what you're going to do. I'm going to let the chain hang like that. Let's just go ahead and set that aside for the moment. One of the things that, if you're familiar with a 3x7 hub and you did order it, or if you're not familiar with it, excuse me, putting it on the first time, it can be a little bit confusing. If you look at this, it has a special washer on it that has two little tabs. It's real important that those follow the wheel into the dropouts and not precede them. Also notice that the axle has two flat spots, one on this side, one on this side. Those need to actually go up into the dropout that goes basically on the sides, and I'll try to be clear about that when we put it in. One thing I find that's useful for first-time users of this hub is just to go ahead and remove those two pieces on that side and remove them on this side. Later you probably won't need to do that, but the first time it does aid in assembly. If you find you're having difficulty installing the hub, at a later time you can do the same thing. So we're going to put this on. When you put the wheel in, put it between the two chains, take the first chain at the top and put it on the smallest cog. You can take off any of the packaging at the same time. Go ahead and put it in the suitcase. So we're going to set that on there, that, and pull the derailleur back and it'll start to drop in. Drops into the dropouts. Now you can see how the flat spots actually make it so that since it's an oversized axle, it'll make it so as it goes up into the dropouts. It won't turn from this spot. You can see it actually will be a little bit too big. Now we're going to put on the washer. Go ahead and slide the washer on like that. Notice the tabs are going to go down. And then the nut. And remember, the nuts look a little bit different from each other. One of them has this extension here with a little rounded edge that makes the chain pull smoothly. So it's important that this one go on the right side. And we'll put the other one on. And you're actually going to use the pedal wrench end that you got with the bike. Okay. At this point we're going to go ahead and set the rear end aside. When it comes time to join it up with the rest of the bike, it'll be ready. Now we're going to assemble the front part of the tandem. Open up the suitcase and we'll pull out all the pieces that you're going to need and a few of the pieces that will be for other things. One of the first pieces you'll take out is the stacker unit for the trailer that I talked about before. You're going to want to probably just set this aside for now, but this allows the two trailer suitcases to be stacked in such a way that you can get into both of them. I'm going to set this aside for now. Take out the two blankets. If you're in a place where the ground is rough or grassy area where you might lose parts, it's a good idea to go ahead and spread these out to keep from damaging the frame. The stoker bars and the stem is attached. Got the crush protector. Go ahead and just pull the handlebars out at this point and just let them sit outside the suitcase. Start pulling out the frame pieces. The midsection. This is the rear top tube with a bottle cage on top of it. The captain stem. Timing chain. Two seats. And their seat posts. And the boom tube. Now, you may have purchased pedals with your bike or you may not have. Some of the more custom bikes will not have pedals unless you actually ordered them with it. If you bought a family tandem, it most likely will come with pedals. Your confirmation sheet should have actually pointed that out. Go ahead and take the packaging off at this time. Go ahead and take the bike out. notice the front of the top tube actually has a scallop in the top of it, and that's to orient this tube up against this tube here, and so it goes the right direction. So we're going to go ahead and slide that in. And one of the ways to tell is the fact that it actually has the bottle boss pieces on this one. Go ahead and slide it in until it's actually fairly snug. The piece that actually has the pump peg on it is actually the boom tube, and if you notice, the scallop is in a different orientation, whereas this one was this direction. This one is actually this one's to meet up with the bottom bracket. We'll go ahead and slide that one in as well. Goes all the way in. Now, if you're reasonably sure you've gotten those all the way in to where they need to go, I would go ahead and tighten them down. You don't need to get them all the way tight yet, but you don't want them to slip apart while you're trying to assemble the other pieces. Also, you'll notice that there's a set of 3 clamps on each one of, or 3 bolts on these clamps, and they should come snugged so that they don't fall off. If you loosen them up, they'll actually slide forward. At this point, that'll allow the rear of the bike to be installed easily. And if you have a second person to help you with this, all the better. It's a little easier to do. We're just going to slide those back over. Now you want to be able to look at the middle of the clamp and get those 2 gaps underneath that middle bolt if you can. Now we're not going to tighten this down very tight. We're just going to get it just snug enough that we can get the rest of the bike assembled first. If you ordered a kickstand with the bike, it helps a bit in the assembly because it'll keep the bike from tipping over as you do some of the other pieces. At this point, we'll want to put on the front wheel. And hopefully you've already remembered that the quick release should be in place. And this is important to note. If you're not familiar with quick releases, modern day quick releases all come with this curve in it. If the curve tip is facing out, it's not tight yet. You want to tighten the thumb portion of it up to the point where the quick release is about 90 degrees. Very easily goes to 90 degrees. At that point, you're about right. In fact, it'll actually usually say open. You'll be able to read open on the inside of the curve. When you close it down, you'll only be able to read the closed on the outside. It's not a wrench. It's not to be tightened by twirling. It actually has a cam on the inside to be tightened. It's very important. The quick releases don't work at all if you use them as like a wrench. Okay. Next, what we want to do is install the captain's stem, front stem. And here's another note to make. This stem, in order for it to work, it needs to go, there's a rim up inside that goes around about here. You need to push that on all the way to the top of that rim in order for this to actually feel really stable. If when you get on it, it clicks back and forth, loosen this bolt back up all the way and push hard on this. And go ahead and snug this down. We're going to make a trip through the whole bike when we get done and re-snug down every bolt to make sure it's correct. Okay, now we're ready to put the handlebars on. Make sure you can see the tops of whatever shifters you're using. These are rapid fires. The left bar should be the one that actually has the insert in it. Okay, let's go ahead and hook up the front brake right now. Now this is important. This is something that we get calls on from customer service. Is sometimes these cable housings will run up against an edge like this, and it'll feel like it's engaged, but in reality, when you try to hook the brake up, it won't open up far enough. We want to make sure those are all the way in here and all the way in at the top. Make sure that the ferrules are all the way into their seats. If they are, it's generally pretty easy to install the brake, and that nipple will go into that yoke there. Give it a good test and make sure it's working. Ready to go. It's starting to look like a bicycle now. We're ready to put the timing chain on. Find the timing chain. It'll be in one of these little blue bags. Drop it out, make sure there aren't any kinks. There's a kink there. And most of the time, if you find the kink, you can hold it. There's usually two. There's not going to be one of them. And get it to the point where you can get them so there's two of them next to each other, and you can usually run them back and cancel each other out like that. Okay? You'll also notice that on our timing chains there'll be two silver links. And those silver links are actually timing marks to help you to synchronize the cranks. I'm going to hang on to those, and for the moment we'll just hang that there. On the bikes with same-side drive like we have here on this Family Tandem, you're going to need to bring the drive chain to the outside and let it hang while we do the timing chain portion of this. So we're going to find our timing links, and we're going to drop it to the inside. Now, if you notice that the rear of the bike has a double chain ring, and we're going to use the small one. What we're looking for is the chain rings that are the same size front to rear. And on the back side of each one of the bikes, of these chain rings here, you're going to find a little dimpled hole. And you just go around and find that hole, and we're going to hang the silver link on that tooth where that hole is, and make sure it goes all the way around. Alright? And then we're going to come to the front, take it to the front, and we're going to drop this on the inside, like that. And then we're going to find the hole on this one. It's right there. And we're going to go ahead and drop that silver link on that one there. Make sure the chain's still engaged there. And if you have a kickstand, it's very simple to do. As long as you don't run into the kickstand, you should be able to pick the bike up slightly. And the chain is on. Okay? At this point, go ahead and drop the drive chain back on to the big ring in the front. There we go. It's installed. Now you notice it's a little bit loose here, and we're going to tighten that up to the right tension. If you look down the top, make sure that that tube got oriented so that the bottle boss holes are facing straight up, and we can go ahead and snug down these front ones. You want them to actually be tight. Same as this one. Now if you'll notice, I've got this bottom tube off just ever so slightly, and the pump peg is not really in the middle. So we're going to loosen up all the bolts just a little bit. As it turns out, to tighten the chain, that's how we're going to tighten the chain anyway. Go ahead and just turn that a little bit until that pump peg's straight up in the top. And then Now we've got all these top bolts tight. They should be snug at least. This top clamp here also has bottle bosses on it too, and you might want to go ahead and straighten it up at the same time. Okay, we can tighten it too. Alright, we're almost ready to do the chain. Go ahead and tighten the front ones back up. The front one's here, now we've got it oriented. Front on the lower. And to tighten the chain, or loosen the chain either...
Okay, hang on a second. And action. Okay, have your hand on there, okay. And give it a tug and then you're done. Okay, and action.
Also, check this back clamp here. We want to make sure that that clamp is going to clamp both sides of the front and the rear of the bike. And since we're going to be adjusting the chain with this one, you notice that we can slide this back and forth. You want to slide this all the way to the back. You don't want to tighten it all the way up yet, because this is how we're going to adjust the chain. Now notice I can pull this together, and if the chain is too tight, I can pull this together and the two bottom brackets will come slightly closer together and leaves the chains really loose. Or I can put a little bit of weight on the bike and the chain becomes quite tight. And what we want to be able to do is we want it to have just a little bit of movement into it, so it doesn't actually grind when we pedal. So once we've got maybe half an inch of movement, then we want to snug this down, this lower clamp here. Put the kickstand up and pedal backwards. And check. You notice that the chain rings are not totally concentric. No matter what kind of chain ring you get, they're not totally concentric. You want to make sure that at its tightest point, that it's not so tight it's going to interfere with pedaling. And that's about right. You can see it moves at the tightest point, it moves just about 1/4 of an inch. And it feels smooth when I pedal backwards. When you're satisfied you've got the chain at the right tension, tighten this up tight. Okay. Now we're going to run the cables. We want to do the rear brake first. These are designed to normally keep tension on. If for some reason this spring mechanism falls out, they're quite easy to reinstall. Pull the spring back, insert it into the cable guide, and it'll stay then. Alright? Make sure that the cable guides are seated all the way back. Follow this up to the top, to the rear brake, which is right here, and make sure it's seated there. And if you want, you can even hold onto the cable back here with my right hand and pull the brake lever with my left hand and make sure that it's running smooth. You can actually feel it. Next, we're going to install the rear portion of the cable. And once again, we want to make sure it seats into the ferrules here and seats into the ferrule here. And go ahead and attach that together. You don't want to tighten that with any sort of tool. You want to be able to take it apart again later. So just do it by hand, and then we'll come back here and pull it in, slide that nipple into that yoke. Now we're going to go back up to the front again and give it a good pull and make sure that it's tight enough. We've got it's a little bit loose, and it can be easily adjusted with this cable, this barrel right here. I'm going to adjust it to your desired amount. Feels about right. It also helps a little bit with when it comes time to pack the bike, you can actually relax that back off, and it makes taking the brake apart easier. So we'll leave that out like that for now. Feels good. All right. Next, we're going to set up the derailleur cables. And once again, we want to make sure that they're in the right slot. To check which is which, use the left shifter, and if whatever type you have, and figure out, by holding on, figure out which one's actually moving when you do it. Okay, so that's the left one is going to be the 3x7 hub or a front derailleur, whichever your bike has. So the same thing happens here. Find out which one it is that's moving. I'm going to attach those two together. Okay, and the other one, of course, is going to be attached to the other one. Okay. When you attach the 3x7, we want to make sure that that cable is as fully relaxed as possible. So if you have a rapid fire like this, we're going to relax the cable. If it's a twist shifter, you're going to want to do the same thing. If you have STI, same issue. We want to make sure the cable is as long as possible. And back here, and just attach that together like that. All right. At this point, the bike should be ready to ride as far as the shifting is concerned. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the seat post and handlebars. Now, this particular bike comes with a saddle ready to go. Most likely, if you bought one of the customs like the XL Traveler, your seat's going to come disassembled. You get a quick look here how this goes. Most seat posts are set up this way. It has an upper clamp and a lower clamp that allows it for adjustment, and an adjustment bolt here. You're going to insert this through the stoker stem and then down into the seat post. And for your own purposes, you're going to need to be doing some setup once the bike's done getting the bike adjusted. And my suggestion is get the captain's bike adjusted first. That way you can do all the movements on the rear without affecting what the captain's doing too. So we're going to go ahead and just snug the seat down, get the seat straight first. And then we'll just make a good guess to begin with on the stoker stem, just to get it in place. Once you get the bike set up, you're going to want to mark this somehow so you can tell where everything was. You don't have to go through setting it up again for both riders each time you travel with it. This also has another piece down inside here. We'll bring it up to a normal height, whatever it is you think you should be using. If you have measurements, it's a good place to start right now. I'll go ahead and get them measured right in. Okay. Now the rear of the bike. Also, be careful not to take this out any farther. There will be some knurling on each one of these painted pieces that tells you where your maximum is. Be sure not to take them out more than that knurled spot. Okay. And put the pedals on. Remember, the right side of the bike takes a right-hand pedal. The left side of the bike takes a left-hand pedal. Good thing to note here is most of the left-hand pedals will have a knurled edge but someplace on there there'll be an L or an R. Very important. When you're putting the right pedal on, remember that it turns clockwise to go in. And turn it clockwise. That's if you're facing it from the right side of the bike. The left-hand pedal tightens counterclockwise. This is very important. If you try to do the opposite and you get them started and force them in, it'll ruin the crank. Okay, we're almost ready to ride. Now the most important thing we're going to do, all the pieces that we worked with, we're going to tighten down. Make sure everything is tight. Go through one more time. Make sure you tighten everything down. If you don't, it could result in a severe injury. Make sure that this doesn't wobble back and forth. If it does, remember to loosen this back up all the way, push it down again. Make sure the front brake's working. Make sure the rear brake is working. Go through and tighten up all the frame bolts again. Just make sure that there's every one of them. Just assume they're all loose. If you're like me, you probably forgot to tighten one of them. And it's very important that all of them are tight. Oops. I would also assume that the factory may have forgotten to tighten one down. Don't assume that any of them are loose. Go through and make sure that all of them are tight. You don't want to find out during a sudden stop that one of the bolts is loose. Test the handlebars before you go out, particularly if you've got a young person in the back. Make sure it's going to hold them up. And tighten the pedals, remember, right hand side of the bike, right hand threads, tightens clockwise. Left hand side of the bike, left hand threads, tightens counterclockwise. Make sure both wheels are tight. Okay, you should be ready to go out and do your first test ride and your sizing. If you purchase one of our triples, you'll find the bike at this stage after assembling the rear end of the tandem and the front end of the tandem. In this case, we're doing it as though we've actually decided, okay, we've ridden the tandem, we're going to add the triple to the middle of it. As you see, we got the middle section, we've got the middle connector, we've got the connectors that went with the tandem itself, and we're going to put them together in an order that allows us to easily do it. Once again, if you have a second person, it's really an advantage. But it can be done by one person relatively easily. We're going to start by installing the triple connector tube. And you notice it has a scallop that's all the way through, and it's at a 90 degrees. That actually goes in, and you generally have some sort of little written sign that shows where it goes. And it goes all the way in, up against the bottom bracket. Okay? Now we're going to install the midsection. Make sure the bolts this is going to go into, make sure the bolts for these pieces are all very loose. They should be hand loose at this point. We're going to have to work these pieces together. Start by doing the bottom one first. Okay, notice I didn't pull it on all the way yet. We'll actually pull the last little bit on with the timing chain itself. Now we're ready to put these pieces together to join the rear end to the middle section. This basically works very similarly. We'll now install these pieces. Okay. Go ahead and set this on its side. Now this section's a little different. We have these exterior clamps that we can slide all the way on. Once again, having a second person does help a little bit. This bike is so big. But there we go. Push them together. Move the clamps all the way to the back. And at this point, we can put the kickstand up again, if you have one. It makes it a little bit easier. Okay, we're ready to install the chains now. We're going to want to install the rear timing chain first. Now if you notice, I have the drive chain already off the bike. That needs to come off first in order to put the connector chain on the rear. Okay, and if you'll notice, there are the two silver links, the two silver timing links, there and there. I'm going to drape this over on the inside, like that, and find the two little dimples that are on the back side. Little dimple drilled into the back of the chainring. I'm going to drop that silver link on and put the chain in all the way on that side of that chainring. Same thing here, we're going to look for that dimple. There it is. And that tooth there. Okay, let go, let go. With the kickstand, it works really quite well. You can actually just make sure that the chain's not falling off of the back first. And you can just roll it on. Now there it is. Now notice it's a little bit loose. We can actually just turn the bike a little bit like that, and out it goes. Alright. I'm going to go through and just snug up the bolts just a little bit at this point. I'm not really quite ready to adjust the chain. I'm just going to snug the bolts up a little bit. And we'll put the middle section chain on. we're ready to put the middle chain on. If there's a question about which is the middle chain, if you hold the two chains up against each other, the middle chain will be about 2 inches shorter from end to end. It has the same silver links though, and it goes on the outside. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to drop it over the back side of the front of it and get it situated on the rear first. I'm going to use the same timing mark that we used for the other one. And the timing mark that's on this one, which is right there. And once again, there it is. And notice the space that was here has suddenly disappeared. The timing chain actually pulled it together. We're in good shape. Now all we have to do is hook up the cables, which we can start doing. Start with the rear brake cable. Follow it through, make sure it's sitting in the cable ferrules, the housing sitting in the cable ferrules properly. And notice this one's not sitting in its cable ferrules. We give it a good tug, pull it back in and sit it in there. That one's set. Give the rear brake a quick squeeze. Feels good. If it's a little bit loose, you can always adjust it with the cable barrel at the front here. Confirm which cables are which by trying to shift it and pulling. Notice I'm pushing it with my thumb and it's moving down here, so we know this is the left side or the 3x7. So I know that the 3x7 is going to be this one on the bottom. If you have a front derailleur, it'll be the same cable. Once again, make sure that we're dealing with a 3x7 here. It's on the bottom. Okay. And then we know the other one just needs to be hooked up. Okay. Now we'll install the seat and the rear stoker bars. The rear stoker stem is designed to work with an adult in the back and a child in the front. So we can do a lot of adjustment with this. We'll go ahead and the thing to do, of course, is set up the tandem captain first, then set up the child, and then set up the rear, whoever they're going to be in the back. If it's another child, it can be adjusted too. Okay. Now we'll put the pedals on. Now just like when you assembled the front of it and the rear of the tandem, right hand pedal, right hand threads. Now it's interesting to note that this bike has the crank shorteners on for a small child. The smaller the child, the shorter the crank should be. So make a choice for your child on which one's going to work and choose a hole. As they grow, you can move them up and eventually take the crank shorteners off. Remember, left hand side, left hand threads, It tightens counterclockwise. Now, next thing we need to do is adjust the chains and then tighten the frame down. Go over it again, the frame one more time to make sure everything is snug. Once again, so we've got a chain here that's pretty tight. If we want to loosen that chain, as long as the frame member is still loose, we can actually grab it across like this and pull the frame together a little further. You can see it loosened it up. If you find it wants to spring back a little bit, go ahead and tighten up the front pieces first. Because by pulling that chain together, you've snugged those in all the way. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one slightly loose. And as I push down in here, I can make the chain stay a little bit looser. And when I tighten that down, then we have enough play in there to have an easy freewheeling chain. Okay, we're very close to be able to ride. Now it's very important once again that once we've done this operation, we go back over and check all the bolts to make sure that they're tight. You're going to have 2 people on this bike, or 3 people on this bike, so it's very important that everything is tight. Now we haven't actually adjusted this rear chain yet, so we should probably take care of that. Now notice this one's actually a little bit loose. So in this case we'll actually want to put pressure on the top, like this, and we'll actually pull it out so it's snug. There you go. A little bit of pressure in there. Tighten that lower section because that's the part that's expanded. Okay, we're in good shape. So we checked all the bolts. The last thing we're going to do on this bike is install the drive chain. Very simply, pull the derailleur forward, set the chain on the chain ring all the way around, and the bike's ready to ride. A point to note is after you've gone through and made all the adjustments, once again, go through, check the bolts for the handlebars, the seats. We're going to have people that are, the bike's going to have quite a lot of weight on it. So you want to make sure everything is quite tight. To turn your triple into a double, I'm going to go through some simple steps of removing the middle section and reattaching the two ends so there's just two seats. We start by removing the chains. In order to remove the chains, we need to loosen up the different Allen bolts, and you can see all the different lugs that actually hold the Allen bolts on each one of these clamps. Here and here, on the back side here, up here. Once those bolts are released, you can see that the middle sections will actually come together and allow the chains to be loose. At that point, they can be rolled off by pedaling backwards, put a little pressure towards the inside, pedal backwards, and the chain will release. Remove the chain and set this one aside. Want to do the same thing with the rear chain. Push it to the inside, rotate it out, off. Don't remove this one though, just leave this one sit, because we're going to actually reattach this chain to the front. At this point, we're going to disconnect the cable sections that actually attach the derailleurs and the brakes. And very simply, grab the two pieces and turn them off. There. There. And there's also a section for the upper brake that goes along the top tube. At this point, make sure that the pieces are loose, and if you lift the bike up and down in the middle, the two tubes will actually walk themselves out. And the halves come apart. Very carefully, set one side down, and the other side down. Or remove the middle section before we do anything with the rear end. Find the camming tool in your tool bag. Notice the small hole. Slip the hole over the camming peg and lean on the bike slightly, very slightly, and push down, and it will open up the bicycle. When you reach the end of the camming tool's distance, you should be able to pull it apart by hand at that point. After you've used the camming tool to its full extent, you should be able to pull it apart with your hands the last little bit, and it should come apart in two pieces. At that point, if you're getting ready to pack the bike, will actually be one of the last things we put into the suitcase. If not, if you're just going to ride as a tandem, I would leave this part assembled, ready to go for the next time you want to use it. Now we're ready to assemble the two halves back into a tandem. The key to this is making sure that you line up the two pieces properly. Get the longer of the two just barely started. Line the other one up just right, get them to go, and they'll start to slide together. You don't need to get them to slide together all the way right at the first. Once you've got it standing up, slowly work them together. Once you've worked it most of the way in by hand, you can use the timing chain to pull it all the way the rest of the way. Put the timing chain on the inside, attach it to the bottom, and put a little bit of weight on the top of the saddle, not very much, and just pull backwards, and it'll actually pull it all in together. It's now set up partway anyway, at least as a tandem. We need to hook up the gears and make sure everything is tight and in line. And start by reinstalling the cables. And you want to make sure that the derailleur is all the way to the small cog in the rear. And basically all you need to do is pedal there, and it'll drop down. Make sure, if you have a 3x7, that you've relaxed the cable as far as it will go. That way the cable will come back as far as possible. Then, basically put these back together, and you're ready to go. Now that we've got the two halves connected along with the cables and the tubes, the chain now actually needs to be reinstalled in order to get the cranks timed properly. If you look at the chain has some special timing links on it. You can see they're a silver color. We're going to work on, there's actually some marks on the backs of the chain rings that actually show where those go, and it'll help you in referencing the different cranks. So we're going to pull those off again. Get everything set in neutral so that you can pedal the cranks backwards. Once again, you're going to push the chain in at the bottom and pedal backwards until the chain is off. At this point, you're going to want to look for the indents on the backs of the chain rings. And you'll see there's one there. It's just a very shallow hole. And there's one on this crank back here at the same time. You're going to want to derail this chain all the way off until you find the timing links. There's one. And there's the other one there. Two silver links, one there and one there. We're going to put one silver link on the back one and install the chain all the way around the chain ring on this one. And then we're going to install the timing link on this one. And it helps to have a second person to help lift up the end of the bike. But basically pedal forward and the chain will pop on. And now your cranks are lined up properly. After that, be sure, once again, that all of the different Allen wrench fittings that hold the bike together are properly tightened. You're now ready to ride. Packing portion of the Tandem Traveler. If you have a Family Tandem, a Traveler XL, or a Triple, This is the section that goes through the different pieces of disassembly and packaging. Shall we begin? With all the different packing, we always start by taking off the pedals. Remember that the right-hand pedals, the right side of the bike, have right-hand threads. The left-hand side pedals have left-hand threads. Now remove the seats and the handlebars. Excuse me. Now remove the seats and the rear stoker bars. At this time we'll remove the timing chain. In order to remove the timing chain on any of the same side drive bicycles such as the XL, the Family Tandem, or the Triples, the drive chain must first be removed off the front in order to allow space to take this apart. So we're going to remove the drive chain for just a moment because we'll actually put it back on at some point before we actually pack the bike. Then we're going to loosen the rear clamp here. You can see there's a clamp here and a clamp here. We'll loosen that so that the timing chain has a chance to relax. To remove the timing chain, push inward at the bottom and pedal backwards. Chain will then be loose enough to take off. Reinstall the drive chain to keep it out of the way. Next, set up the seat posts to slide down inside the frame. Now if you spend a fair amount of time setting up special sizing, it's a good idea to mark this with maybe a magic marker, some sort of marker so you don't have to go through resetting up your bike for yourself again. Now we'll take the front handlebars off and the front stem. The front handlebars, loosen the top of the stem where the handlebar clamp is, and slide the bars apart. Now it's important to note here that you may have drop bars, you may have H bars. They all work basically the same way. The advantage of the tandems and the suitcases is there's lots of extra room. At this point, no need to worry about whether it's going to be more difficult to pack one type of bike or one type of bar over the other type of bar. There should be plenty of room, and you won't find any trouble with it. Now we'll take the bike in half. Use the cable splitters to open up the cables. There's 2 derailleur type cables and 1 brake cable that goes across the top of the bike. The 2 clamps that you loosened up previously towards the rear stoker seat tube, make sure that the bolts are quite loose. Disengage the cables from the rear set of cable guides. Put the hang down and slide the clamps forward. At that point, the bike will come in half. We'll just set the rear side apart for the moment. At this point, we need to take these 2 connecting tubes out. Make sure they're loose. There's 1. There's 2. Next, remove the front wheel. Loosen the quick release. Loosen the back nuts so it'll go over the tops of the wheel the axle retainers, and then take apart the Tektro V-brakes by pulling the nipple out of the yoke so that there's enough space for the wheel to withdraw. Take the front wheel out. Set that aside for the moment. Now we'll do the same for the rear wheel. The rear wheel, most of our bikes, comes with a 3x7 with a bolt-on style hub. You're going to want to disconnect the 3x7 chain first by depressing the little copper button and withdrawing it from the indicator chain. Next, you'll have the pedal style wrench that you received with your bicycle. It's a 15mm. Will fit the same size as the pedals. Loosen the bolts up, the nuts up, excuse me. Undo the brake and withdraw the rear wheel. We now have the bike disassembled enough to pack. Now we're going to pack the rear of the bicycle. As you can see, here's the items that actually go into the rear of the bicycle. Mostly what we're going to do is focus on the larger pieces. Once we've got the larger pieces in, anything that's long and straight, or things like pedals, small items, bags, or even items of clothing, that sort of thing, there'll be lots of little nooks and crannies you can put those things into. So we'll start with the rear end, what actually goes into the suitcase with the rear end. Start by inserting the rear end of the bike. It goes all the way to the right side of the suitcase. The rear wheel slides back up into it, like that, and goes to the bottom of the case. Far down as will go. The next thing that goes in is the front wheel, and it's going to go over the top of the rear wheel, and it's going to come close to interfering with that hub stub that comes up there. So we're going to put a little piece of protecting material in so that it doesn't actually scratch the rim. Push that down in place like that. Now, if all you have is the bike, you know, you can put other things in here, but these three things need to go with each other each time. If you have a rear rack, it would be a good time to put that in now. And the rear rack, put the front tire between the two stays, like that, and it goes in behind the rear. And once again, push it down into place. The next thing is if you have a trailer. Now there is a stacker unit that goes with the trailer too, and I'll show you that. That actually will pack with the front of the bicycle. But the rest of the trailer framework, the tongue, you can see the tongue portion of it that hooks to the bicycle itself, and then the axle pieces. The axle pieces will set in pretty much any place in there, really. They don't take up a lot of room. But this actually threads back underneath the chainstay. You can see it's gone underneath. Pull this out real quickly. You see it's gone under the chainstay and through the rack itself, all the way to the end. And if you're having a little bit of a tight fit, you can actually bend the tongue at the end, and it'll actually fit down right next to the chain ring here. And once again, you go back in and reset the wheel. So it sits down in nice and snug. Trailer axles can fit in right next to it like that. One trailer wheel can go here, and one right underneath the front wheel like that. The last item you add anytime you're doing this is the crush protector. And put one of the free flange down pretty much as close to the middle of the suitcase as you can get it. And you need to make sure you can run it through the spokes. It's a good idea just to check and see if anything's sticking up above it. If the rear rack is sticking up slightly, it has enough flexibility to it that when the suitcase closes down on it, it's not going to be a problem. At that point, you should be able to close the suitcase. Make sure there's no fabric or cables or anything like that in along the rim of the suitcase. Close it down. Now the crush protector is tall enough that you can see it's gonna stretch the suitcase just a little bit. That's actually a good thing. That means that everything actually fits in snug and won't shift around very much. Check for sharp spots like the front of the front wheel, axle, anything that might be sharp that's sticking up and poking through. Anyway, the rear of the bike is packed. We're ready to put the front of the bike in. The sequence we'll do this in is we'll pack the whole front of the bike. If you have a triple, we'll actually add the triple pieces after the rest of the bike is packed. So we'll start off with the front end. Notice we've got a piece of packaging to help protect the end of the steer tube. Snap that over the top. We've got packaging on the handlebar ends to keep the metal from actually scratching the frame. Each one of those. We're going to put a piece of blue plastic packaging material around each one of the tubes here. And then there's some Velcro here to put make sure that it stays. There's also a little piece here for the crank, for the bottom part the bottom crank as it goes in to keep it from rubbing up against the edge of the suitcase. I'm going to set that in. Fork backwards in the corner. Put that back in the corner. And the handlebars can sit right in the front like that. Next, we'll put the seats in. One seat there. One seat there. And then, this is one of the main tubes that actually hooks the front end to the rear end of the bike. And you get a long gray bag for that. There's one on the top of the suitcase. This is the rear top tube. And you can leave the water bottle cage in place. If you have a water bottle cage on this one, you can loosen the bolts off and take that off as a whole and pack it in a separate spot. In this particular case, we don't have a bottle cage there. Okay. This is the front stem for the captain. And notice, instead of spreading things out, I'm trying to concentrate things so that when we close the suitcase, they're held together. If we spread them out and one of them gets loose in the suitcase, it can tumble around. So we tend to want to put things pretty much in close proximity to each other like that. The rear stoker bars, and as you'll see later, there'll be a way to do drop bars that leaves things in pretty much in the same configuration. And at this point, you can notice there's quite a bit of extra room in the suitcase. My recommendation is if you have a helmet or that sort of thing, this would be a good time to put it in. We want to avoid having anything tumble around in the suitcase when we're traveling it or when somebody, particularly airlines, are transporting it for you. We give a couple of blankets. They're also for when you're assembling your bike or disassembling your bike to keep it from, if you're on a concrete surface, something to scratch the bike from touching the ground. They also make great pieces for taking up space in the suitcase. Most likely you're going to have extra luggage that you're going to want to put in here that'll help take up that space too. But if you don't, these work actually quite well. You know, if you notice I've concentrated things back in here, I'll actually put this so it sits a little higher, and when we push down on that, it'll actually keep things from rattling. Also, we're going to want to put a crush protector in here, so if anybody stands on the suitcase, it's not going to collapse it down. So we're ready to close. Down on that. After you've packed any of the suitcases, it's always a good idea to give them a good jiggle to make sure there's nothing that's still loose inside. If it does rattle a bit, you might want to go back in and find that spot that's loose. If you have a triple, we're going to show you how to pack, continue to pack from here. We're going to add the triple in after most of the rest of the front of the bike is in, and it's all going to go in with the front of the bike. Notice I've already removed the pedals from the triple section. I've got the seat out, and everything's ready to go. And also notice I've removed the stoker bars and stem from the original portion of the packing. It's going to go in on top of the triple. So we're going to take the removable piece off of the triple, the connector, and put it in its bag. And it's going to go back here with the other pieces. And then we're going to take the stick it in its big blue bag here. And notice I'm going to leave a little bit of the crank arm sticking out. That's so I can see where it is. We'll cover that up as we close the suitcase. That's going to fit in, so you can see the shape of it here. It's going to fit in that corner there, like that, and rest on top. You see I've got this crank arm back into the corner of the suitcase. Sit this back on top. Little seat here. And normally this sits like that on the triple. I've loosened it here so I can turn it to the side. And then I'll cover it with a bag. And we'll lay that right on top as well. That. Put in a crush protector. Still a spot here for it. Alright. Also, it's a good time if you had a trailer, and this goes for before we put the triple in. The crush protector goes very well right in to this side here and sits in. Once again, put the blankets on to keep things from moving around. And shut the case. Make sure all the fabric, make sure there are no cables sticking into the edge of the suitcase. Ready to go. If you have an XL Traveler or a Traveler XL that has drop bars, this is the way to actually, once you've got the main frame in, you're going to want to put the bars in, set up. Put them in like this before you start the rest of the stuff. The rest of the pieces will go in pretty much the same as with the flat bars.